These three former admissions officers have been asked to evaluate this film student's college applicant profile, just like how they would do in a real IvyWise roundtable session.
Hi, I'm Katie. I'm a college admissions counselor with IvyWise and a former admissions officer at MIT, and excited to work with students across the spectrum of interests, from things in computer science all the way to filmmaking, which is this next profile we're going to dive into.
Hi, I'm Rachel. I'm a college admissions counselor with IvyWise, a former admissions counselor at Swarthmore and a former admissions reader at Northeastern. As a counselor, I think my style is supportive. I'm excited every day to work with students, and then I also like to bring a lot of structure to the work that we do together, since there are so many deadlines to manage as we move through the process.
Hi, my name is Eric, and I am a college admission counselor at IvyWise. I'm a former admission officer at Columbia University, as well as the New School in Lower Manhattan. I think that my counseling style is a mix of both hyper supportive but also very direct, right? It's important for me to empower my students so that they know that they will be rewarded for their hard work in high school, independent of what their aspirations are. And I'm trying to mitigate a lot of the anxiety and stress that surrounds the process. And we're going to give you some insights based on a real student's profile, what we actually do here at IvyWise when we enter into our roundtable process. So we have a student who is an aspiring film producer and screenwriter, which is right in my wheelhouse, in my mind. Having worked in Southern California, having lived in LA for almost a decade, I saw a lot of these students, and this is a really impressive young person. They have a lot of substantive hands-on experience in the film industry, which is very niche. And when we're working with students, whether that's an athlete or someone who has an interest in the arts, that can sometimes create a little bit of a different kind of a process, because it may be a portfolio-driven process. It might be where we're running two concurrent lists, one that they like in the presence of their talent and one that they like in the absence of their talent, should this person change their mind. So this is a student who's really high in the class. They've got nearly a flawless grade point average at a 4.0, and they have a 1400 SAT score. The courses that they've selected and the outside of organizations and extracurriculars that they've been involved with do complement their expressed interest in filmmaking in a really nice and neat way. So they've been the first assistant director in a actual production. They actually wrote a screenplay that was shown at a small film festival. And I think they've done voiceover work as well as a young person. So, this is a real industry heavy, talent-based applicant that I think is going to be really compelling in a lot of the places where they're going to be reviewed. Katie, what do you think of the applicant? Some initial impressions of things that stood out for you, given that we're in this roundtable committee-based review. What stood out to you from this applicant?
Yeah, a couple things that really jump out to me about this applicant is just the sheer amount of things the student is doing in the world of filmmaking outside of school. Filmmaking is not typically a high school class that you're spending a lot of time on, and so being able to maintain that 4.0 GPA, getting a 1400 on the SAT, taking courses like sociology, psychology, ancient philosophy, there's a lot of time that you have to put into doing film production and editing and sitting there. I say, as I've made 2-minute videos of my children, and that takes me 17 hours. And so I know how much time goes into all these things that the student is creating, and to balance that with such a rigorous level of academics is really impressive. And I think that for me is something as an admissions officer that would jump out. What about you, Rachel? What do you think about the courses that this student has called out that they're interested in?
I was excited to see that the student is interested in film, as well as elements, I think, academically that could contribute to the depth of their storytelling. I love the idea of exploring kind of ancient philosophy, psychology, and how that might contribute to screenwriting, telling stories, kind of understanding humanity. I think there's a lot going on here that really sheds a lot of light on the students' interests. I also think that their commitment to their extracurriculars would really stand out. Like, you really imagine the student has had to hustle to create these opportunities. So I'm seeing a lot of initiative in the students' extracurricular activities.
Eric, is there anything that gives you pause about this student's resume of activities?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I mean, this is someone who could at first glance come off as somewhat one-dimensional, right? Their interests are pretty heavily stacked and contained and narrowly focused in film. One of the things that I like to do with students that are so narrowly focused in one area is to help them to be able to articulate the why behind the what. So the what is that this person enjoys doing film and making film and writing screenplays. I want to get at the why, and I think that that's something that colleges are going to want to understand as well. So it's about enlarging what seems like a very narrow focus into something that's bigger, because for a liberal arts college or a more writing intensive curriculum, I'm going to want to understand why the student is attracted to the writing process. Where do they get their inspiration from? What was the initial impetus or catalyst for them to get interested and engaged in this particular area? So I think it's about finding ways to round out the application so that it is not totally one-dimensional, because no student has only one facet to who they are. And that's part of the process that usually comes out in something like the personal statement or supplemental essay brainstorming of the why, right? Why does this get you going? Why does this light you up? And that's really fun and interesting to explore in mind for me.
I love the why behind the what. I'm going to trademark that from you and use it with every single student I talk to.
Eric, I think that's a great suggestion about maybe exploring that in the personal statement. Like, let's hear a little bit more about the why and maybe how this has really impacted or transformed the student into the person that they are.
Rachel, for you, going off of that, what do you feel like you really want to learn from a student, not just this one, in the personal statement? Like, what is, for you, what's the purpose of the personal statement?
That's a great question. I think I'm really looking for kind of present day reflection on who a person is, and maybe an event or a moment or something that has happened or something they've been a part of that helped to get them to the person that they are today. So I really want it to be present, perhaps a little future oriented, and really sharing a little bit about who you are kind of at this moment. It's a tall order, it's a big ask, but it is the college admissions process. So maybe this is the place for that type of work. I don't know, Eric, what do you think about the personal statement in general?
I think the personal statement is a really fun exercise. So it has a really high intimidation factor. I know with a lot of my students, they don't know where to start, and there's so much clutter in their minds because they may have been reading examples. They might know of other personal statements that have content that seems really lofty, but I love really bringing it small, right? So I like with my students to encourage them to keep it small, because that keeps things within arm's reach. Every response, every topic has both a cliche avenue and then a really exceptional and interesting avenue. And I'm trying to get students to go into that interesting avenue that's going to elevate the essay into what I would estimate is about 20% of essays that I used to read in admission. That might even be an overestimation. That really landed and made an impact and made me sustained my interest throughout. So that's why, okay, I have a filmmaker. What are all of the stereotypes that an admission reader is going to have about a filmmaker? The way that you defy those stereotypes is by taking that person into your head and into your thought process. So tell me about one of your films, and then go even smaller. What's the story and why did you pick it? And what was your inspiration behind that? This is the same thing that I would ask of an engineer or an athlete. It's take me into one game, take me into one practice, take me into one hackathon or one exercise or one physics problem, and take me through why that's interesting to you and what gets you going and lights you up about that. And that's where I think that's where the magic of the personal statement lies, is in that very small thing of helping the reader understand what it is that lights you up.
Sometimes when I am working with students who are having a little bit of writer's block, I ask them to write the most cliche essay they can, like put every single cliche in there. So like, let's put every stereotype, let's put every and then I won I made the winning catch and I won the trophy and blah, blah, blah. I feel like sometimes you need to just get that stuff out of your head when you're writing a personal statement. And moving that stuff aside can be helpful to then actually dig into that reflective, introspective work. Another question I always am asking my students is that the sort of, all right, you've written this whole essay and so what? Okay, so what does this mean? What does this mean for who you are today? What does this mean for who you want to be in the future? And that's what's so often not there in kind of the first draft of a personal statement. So be excited to see what the student comes up with.
I love that too. It's always the sweat was dripping down my brow as I approached the podium. The hush fell over the audience. I'm like, yes, get that all out. That's terrible, right? We see. Viewed. So this person has expressed an interest in particular universities, and some of the usual suspects are represented, right? So we see New York University, particularly the film and television program at the Tisch School of the Arts. I think that's a natural choice for this young woman. Columbia University School of the Arts was listed, as well as New York Film Academy, USC, and Chapman. I think these are great starting points, right? And I think this student has a lot to offer both academically and extracurricularly that's going to position her to be a very compelling and competitive applicant, even in these pools that are saturated and going into an industry that's also hyper-competitive and saturated.
So knowing that this student is really looking for a lot of financial support, what are some schools that you guys might pop on the list that are generous with merit-based scholarships?
One school that came to mind for me was University of Miami, which is need-aware in its reading, but does offer need-based financial aid and merit-based financial aid. And they do have a film school within their communication school. And Miami, I would imagine this student to be in an urban environment or a place where they might be a part of movies and films. So being in a place like Miami would be a great location for them.
I think that's a great suggestion. And then just a general, as I'd be working with a student like this, any college where that student is in the top quartile academically, strictly speaking, based on GPA, rigor, curriculum, and testing, if those scores are available, those are the environments where colleges are going to throw a lot of money at the student, usually in the form of merit-based scholarships, to try to get them to attend, right? So a place like Syracuse, which is nearer to 40 or 50% admit, also has film represented, is not the most cosmopolitan place, but at the same time, you could get some interesting footage in Syracuse. And those are kinds of places where, again, if a student is in that upper quartile, then they're admitted. Syracuse really wants them to yield because they're going to be a top student at the school, and they may throw a lot of money at them to incentivize them to attend.
Fordham is another one that popped on my list. I've had a ton of students who ended up there, gotten a lot of merit-based money, and been really happy. And as a fan of Jesuit schools, graduate of Boston College over here, I feel like for this student who seems to kind of tie into filmmaking as it relates to social justice issues, I think Fordham could be potentially a really good fit because of that Jesuit identity there. And free money is nice.
Yes, we love free money. I was thinking, I don't know if I said it before, but LMU is another choice that kind of popped out with its proximity to LA and more forgiving selectivity, and also just like really beautiful place. So I think that it's important for this student to also enlarge the scope of their search, thinking about perhaps adding liberal arts colleges. I was thinking about even some lesser selective colleges that also have film programs, maybe like Emerson in Boston is kind of a sleeper, where she could get really strong hands-on experience straight away at freshman year. Northeastern could be a good choice too because of their co-op program. So even though it's not a natural match in terms of film, Northeastern has a unique program where students take a year, they go work full-time, and they get their hands-on experience, and they get all their college credit for that entire year. So that could be an opportunity to go work at Paramount or Netflix or Amazon Studios, which I think owns everything now. Yeah, Rachel, I mean, one of the benefits of the IvyWise Roundtable too is we get the cumulative expertise of all of our counselors. I mentioned that maybe Northeastern would be a good match for the student, but I'm not sure if the co-op is really well suited for them. You read for Northeastern. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think Northeastern could be a great fit. I mean, especially if they are able to relate their interest into some things that they might be able to do in Boston. Of course, Northeastern notoriously does not have a supplemental essay, so there wouldn't necessarily be a place to share that. But you could see having a lot of opportunities with film in Boston, making their interest in the school all the more valid. I want to commend this student too on kind of narrowing down the difference between like film studies and film production. So they've already explored like a nice balance of places where they could actually do some more technical production, as well as places where they might be doing a little bit more of study of the history of film. But having a great sense of what those differences are means that you are that much closer to getting what you really want out of your college experience.
So given the breadth and depth of this student's kind of resume of filmmaking and screenwriting and everything that they've done, what is the best way to showcase this on the application? You know, the Common App only gives you 10 activities. What should the student do, Eric?
That's a really good question, because I think what we want to see, or at least ideally in my estimation with students, I want the pieces of the application to be complementary and not redundant. So we want to make sure that all of the substantive experience is recognized, but that it's not being hit at every point in the application. This is a perfect opportunity if the student has the ability, which I suspect that they do in terms of their natural talent, to build a portfolio that could be included with their application. So portfolios are typically not required unless they are applying to a dedicated film program, in which case there may be a requirement. But even as a supplemental element to the application, in order to show the admission officer their actual talent. So typically a program like Slide Room will be used where a student can upload clips or images or even just artist statements about their different pieces and the experiences that they've had. And a one-page resume, I think, can also be something that a student could naturally and probably quite easily construct that may or may not be required given the academic program which they're ultimately applying to. But this is an opportunity where, in addition to the 10 required activities outlined in the Common Application, there may be an opportunity for legitimate supplements to be included that wouldn't overburden the admission office, or dare I say even annoy them, because we usually want students to play by the rule and only submit what's required. But in this case, I think it would make complete sense to offer a supplement in some organized form.
This is also a student who might really be excited about the optional video interviews or video submissions that a lot of colleges have started to introduce. And so have fun with that. Submit a 2-minute video to Brown, submit an optional video interview to Wake Forest. Lots of schools out there that are adding that optional video.
So this was a small look into our IvyWise process. If you want to do an even deeper dive, reach out to IvyWise today, and we wish you all the best of luck.
Contact IvyWise today to learn more about our services, including our signature roundtable, which simulates the real-world admissions committee evaluation process.